Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, or Dandavat Pranams, depending on which mat or sangha you're in. I'm giving a brief talk today on the meaning of offshoots and the problem of religious language. We all know that when we say something, it can be interpreted in different ways. Over the last few weeks, some devotees have been getting in touch with me, asking me questions about certain mats and sanghas, and asking me why I've connected a certain mat to another mat on a graph. What does that line mean? And when I write my book, that I make clear that that mat's not linked to that mat, and etc., etc. So the problem of religious language: different things mean different things to different people. So what do we mean by an offshoot? Because the term offshoot is something that often comes up in the description of religious history, religious schisms. So schism means religious division. So the dictionary actually defines an offshoot as a side shoot branch of a plant. So originally it comes from a plant, and so something that's come off of a plant is known as an offshoot. But we use that term in semantics in different ways. So in terms of the description of sociological groups, we can use the term offshoot to mean maybe a limb or a offspring or a branch or a byproduct or a derivative or a descendant or even a consequence. Now, on a recent chart that a devotee put together, piecing all the different mats and sanghas in the UK, we put together the original mats and then the mats that they came from. And those mats were connected on the graph with a line. So one devotee got in touch to say it absolutely should be made clear that that mat is independent from the other, and they in no way come under the jurisdiction of the previous mat. Now, hopefully you're sticking with me. Now, it's really important to accept that we can't and we should not rewrite history. People do fall out. Gurus do have differences of opinion, and some people, even devotees of Krishna, choose to leave certain mats and leave certain sanghas because they disagree with some theology or some philosophy or some organizational rules. That happens. That's life. And we shouldn't rewrite history. Now, this might be an extreme example, but if you look at what happened in 1930s, 1940s Germany, we had an example of a right-wing government, an authoritarian fascist right-wing government, trying to pretend that certain groups of people didn't exist. Now, one of the things we can learn from history is we shouldn't pretend that anyone doesn't exist or any groups of people have never existed. Even if we disagree with a Hare Krishna because they're in a different mat or a different sangha, we should at least accept that they exist. Now, ISKCON, if you look at the history of ISKCON, ISKCON has had its difficulties, its problems, and ISKCON has its offshoots. So we cannot pretend that those offshoots don't exist. Now, there's a good chance that some of the offshoots, if we're in ISKCON, for example, or we could be in a different mat, we cannot pretend that those offshoots don't exist because we don't agree with them. Now, for a lot of people in ISKCON, and maybe even myself included, we will disagree theologically and philosophically with the Ritvik movement. So the Ritvik movement is this concept that Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, was the last of the Diksha Gurus. So after Prabhupada, there are no further Diksha Gurus, and through a system or a process similar to Christians and Christ, we can become disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So I personally take the view that that isn't a correct or an accurate theology or a philosophy, But I do not pretend that the Rit-Vik movement does not exist. I respect they exist. We live in a modern, liberal, democratic society. They're allowed to open temples. They're allowed to serve prasadam. They're allowed to talk to people. We shouldn't pretend that certain groups of people don't exist. And also, just because one Gaudiya Vaishnav group is linked with a line to another Gaudiya Vaishnav group, it doesn't mean that they necessarily come under the authority of that group, or the previous group, or the parent group. Generally, with most offshoots, certainly in the study of religion, it means that they are independent from that. So, the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math, as another example, has a number of offshoots. Now, those offshoots are independent from their parent body. However, we cannot and should not pretend they don't exist, because those offshoots are seen as offshoots because their founder or their originator was inspired or by the previous mat or in the previous mat. Okay. Also, sorry, this is quite scholarly today, but also offshoots can be good and bad. Based on opinion, it can be objective or subjective. So, not all offshoots are necessarily a bad thing. It may be time for a refresh. It may be time for a rethink. So, for me, in terms of understanding religion, a good example of an offshoot was the foundation of the Methodist Church, which ironically was 1776, also the year that the Americans gained their independence from the UK, which some might say was a good offshoot, some might say was a bad offshoot. The Methodists also gained their independence from the Anglican Church. The Church of England, John and Charles Wesley, the founders of the Methodist Church, two brothers, wanted to go back to basics. They wanted to refine a church, recreate a church that was based on the teachings of the Bible. The Church of England had got too tied down with Henry VIII and various rules and rituals. So, offshoots in religion exist, and there will be good offshoots and bad offshoots based on our opinion. One of the things I've discovered in this research is that sometimes I've said things, or sometimes I've written things that people might disagree with. And that's absolutely fine. We're adults. We're allowed to disagree with things. We're allowed to say different things, as long as we're respectful, as long as we appreciate that people will have different views. Today is the 6th of February, 2021. Getting used to saying that now. Today we're getting very close to. Let me just check my diary. We're getting close to an appearance day. I think it's Lord Nityananda's appearance day coming up soon in a few weeks' time, and different Gaudiya Vaishnav groups will be celebrating that in different ways. I've almost now come to the end of the draft of my book, which I've been going on about for ages, but we're almost now at the end. And I'm just piecing together some factual information about the gurus in the Nityananda line that have disciples in the UK, and I'm just finishing that off. And then I have found someone, because my own life has got quite busy recently with various things, to then project manage the publication of the book. One of the things some of you have been asking me about the book, one of the things that stalled it slightly is over, I want to make sure that factual information that I present is factually true. There are still some issues around the facts that I'm presenting from 1930s London in terms of the Gaudiya Vaishnav activities there. I made a video some time ago that saying that it's highly likely that Daisy Botel was not a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Maharaj, which has upset a number of people. I still, though, haven't been provided with evidence on the other side that she was, in terms of dates, in terms of, when certain letters were written. I've had a devotee in Wales contact me recently to say that she has a copy of Daisy Botel's offering to the current Acharya of the Gaudiya mission in 1966. And I'm asking this devotee to, send me a copy of this, because that would be a fascinating read. And she's also given me some information to suggest that Daisy Botel was initiated in April 1937, which was sometime later on than I originally thought, and that she was initiated by Tirtha Maharaj, which might possibly be the case if he was in London, but I haven't seen evidence to suggest that he was. So I went off on a tangent there. It's the 6th of February 2021. The problem of offshoots, the problem of religious language. Hare Krishna.